with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and continue with this second segment talking about Rudy Gobert and Shaq and the overall beef between the two. Now, for those of you guys who didn't tune into the previous podcast where I covered this, Shaq on a podcast, he was invited on a podcast for himself, and he was asked, who is the worst player in the NBA? And without hesitation, Shaq pointed at him. Now, Ben Simmons caught a stray in there, which I 100% agree with Shaq on that. Ben Simmons should catch a stray in that and should definitely be in consideration for one of the worst NBA players. But Rudy, not so much. And obviously, a lot of fans were just quick to say that Shaq is just being a hater. And a lot of people know that Shaq doesn't really have much of a fondness for Rudy Gobert, mainly because of the huge contract that Rudy Gobert has signed in previous years. I remember when he was on Utah, he signed a huge contract that made it the most expensive contract that any center has signed at the time. And Shaq just was appalled and couldn't believe that he's making that much money without having much of an offensive game. Because Rudy Gobert's value, you get Rudy Gobert and you want Rudy Gobert on your team because of his defense. You don't want him because of his offense. You want him because of his defense. And the fact that he's making more money than that he was making more money than any NBA center, it really begged the question, was his defense that valuable? Was it really that much of a game changer? And is his defense enough to justify being paid that sum of money? That was the big questions, and Shaq, of course, felt like it wasn't, because when you're from Shaq's point of view, obviously you're going to feel like a player that isn't as good as you shouldn't be making more money than you. That's not only is it a logical thing, it's I believe it might be a pride thing for Shaq. It might be something that he holds dearly. He might take it personally if somebody is willing to pay another player more money if he knows that he's better than that other player. And so it might rub him the wrong way in this. But essentially, despite the fact whether it rubs him the wrong way or not, Rudy Gobert ended up responding to Shaq on a tweet. And I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can pull up the comment on X or on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter. And it says, Rudy Gobert said, quote, "It is sad to see someone that has accomplished as much as you did, Shaq, both in sport and business, still be triggered by another man's finances and accomplishments. I get the entertainment part, but unlike other folks, you need that stuff to stay relevant." That is the exact tweet that he commented on Legion of Hoops post on X, formerly known as Twitter, talking about the podcast on September 5th, 2024. So if you guys want to go ahead and check it, if the tweet is still up there, I believe, because I'm looking at it from an article, then you can go right ahead and see it from there. And obviously, Rudy Gobert doesn't think that, thinks that Shaq is just being a hater and saying that it's sad because, legitimately, Rudy Gobert, he does somewhat have a point, because why are you going to be so fixated on one specific player? Why are you going to have that one player live rent-free in your head, for lack of a better term? And when you yourself have accomplished so much more, he should be an afterthought to you, right? Shaq in the NBA pyramid, in the NBA landscape, history of the NBA landscape, he's up here in terms of history. He was part of the last three-peat that the NBA has seen. He is up here in history. And Rudy Gobert, towards the end of his career, is probably going to be all the way down here. Now, maybe he'll be up here because, the Defensive Player of the Year awards, people are going to remember him for that. But in terms of overall hierarchy, especially in his position, he's not going to be remembered as much of a force aside for it being on the defensive end. Shaq is going to be remembered as the better center. And on top of that, the rings, the finals MVPs, they all prove that case true. So the fact that Shaq is just wasting his time on this is something that Rudy Gobert doesn't really understand, because it seems like Shaq is just picking on him, And a former NBA coach, actually comes out to defend Rudy Gobert after he faced a lot of criticism recently. So Let me just go ahead and continue reading this article. So Jackson spent 12 years in the NBA, and he thinks Gobert should have advanced in other areas of his game by now, but he also feels that much of the criticism is unjustified. He further pointed out that how the game is played has changed, and the bigs haven't liked this development. So this is Jaren Jackson. This is Jaren Jackson Jr.'s. And this is Jaren Jackson Jr. and his comments. Jackson said, "I feel for him. He's another one that plays defense. He's not the prettiest. It's not the prettiest part of the game. It's not the most entertaining. Not going to be on ESPN about his blocks. All of these big guys today, the game has changed. You no longer just sit in the paint. Now these guys got to move." He added, "I think Rudy is just trying to be the best help side defender he can be. He's just not appreciated. There are other areas of his game he probably needs to be better at. As a veteran player, he should be better at other areas of his game, but he's found his niche to play defense. I don't care what people say about him." This is what this is what, was it senior or junior that said this? Hold on. I'm trying to make sure. But I do know that it was Jaren Jackson Sr. who said this. And Rudy Gobert could have had the best season of his career, but it all went in vain after they failed to qualify for the NBA Finals. And that really would have probably shut a lot of criticism about him. But yeah, this is Jaren Jackson Sr. I want to add. Pardon me. The article for some reason says it's junior, and I guess the article is just wrong. And but aside from that, no, it is Jaren Jackson Sr., so the father of Jaren Jackson Jr. and a former coach. But he believes that Jaren Jackson Sr. believes that Rudy Gobert has found his sort of role on the team, and all he's trying to do is play that role to perfection. And yes, I understand, playing a role to perfection. It's what made Dennis Rodman so great. It's what made all these other role players known as being fantastic role players. It's what made Draymond so great as well. It's just the difference is, I guess you could say, well, at least right now, is that those role players, they won championships because they did their role to perfection. Rudy Gobert isn't winning championships by playing his role to perfection. So if you're able to play your role to perfection, but you can't win championships doing that, what's the point? And I guess that's sort of why Jaren Jackson Sr. feels like Rudy should have advanced a little bit more on his game. And the article continues, is Rudy Gobert really that bad? Because people are actually considering listening to Shaq and believing that Rudy is actually that bad. But regretfully, Gobert's excellent play throughout the first two postseason rounds was overshadowed by his struggles trying to guard Luka Doncic during the Western Conference Finals. Because of that series, he got a lot of hate because Luka Doncic ended up hitting the game-winning shot over Rudy Gobert, making him look silly. And Derek Lively II, a big man with the Dallas Mavericks, aimed Gobert for his play during the Western Conference Finals. In Lively's opinion, the Minnesota Timberwolves should not have used him as much as they did in this specific game. And that brings in another question. If teams can't even use you during a game, if teams can't use you and play you 48 minutes in every single minute of the game, what is the purpose of you making all of that money? This is the same thing happened with the French national team. The French national team, when they were going up against, excuse me, I believe it was Germany going into the gold medal game, they ended up sitting Rudy Gobert for a majority of the game, and because they couldn't utilize him. So if you can't utilize a player, what is the purpose of having him make that much money? Does that make sense? And to that, I see Shaquille O'Neal's argument, and I see why he isn't particularly fond of Rudy Gobert and things of that nature regarding his finances. And even though there were some harsh remarks, Shaq had the harshest of remarks. and saying that he is the worst player. So that's just flat out wrong, because I'm sure, like, obviously because Ben Simmons still exists, but also because there are so many other players in the NBA that don't play. You can't put Rudy Gobert in that conversation of being one of the worst. It's just, at that point, it's just hating. Like, I'm sorry, I have to say what it is. That's just hating. For Defensive Player of the Year awards, like, you can't really, yes, he is a liability here and there, but you can't say that he is the worst player ever in the NBA. Like, you just can't. It's just not happening. And, well, it's not that it's not happening. It's just not right. So, aside from that, that's all that I have to say about this second segment. Let me know in the comments what you think about this little feud between Shaq and Rudy Gobert. Which side are you on? Are you on Shaq's side? Are you on Rudy Gobert's side? Or are you like in the middle and sort of agree with both of their sides and just think it's unnecessary drama? Let me know in the comments what you think. But in the third segment, we're going to move on to the third segment, and I'm going to talk about the biggest questions for each and every single ranked college basketball team going into this NCAA season. So for any of you guys who are interested in what I have to say about that, you can go ahead and tune in right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.